Hello, Star Lovelies. It's a great time to be a soul. Today we're talking about this is our first Intuitive Leader Series podcast. And we are here because the new era, nothing's the same. Everything's changing, and it's so hard to determine next steps. And I am here with Claudia Lawrence, one of my favorite people in the world. And she is the CEO and founder of Dinner is Served, which is an award-winning cafe and ready meal company that also does catering events in Ballina, New South Wales, Australia. I just have to confess, Claudia is someone who's near and dear to me. She's been a client of mine since, I want to say, the top of 2021. I'm not sure. And she's been in the one-on-one container. She's been in the Rich and Powerful Leaders Academy container. And we're here today to talk about what it means to be a leader in the new era, dealing with daily things and teams and getting meals out and, doing all these luscious things for people while still maintaining a life, while still maintaining sanity, while still being like doing the dance between intuition and success. So, Claudia, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me, Kim. I really appreciate being here.
And so, what do we want to dive into first? Do we want to dive right into using your intuition on the daily in business and what it means?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
Okay. All right. So, how do you love to use your intuition the most when you're thinking about business?
Look, I like to use it from of really daily, but in my body, I suppose I've really learned how to lean into the physical aspect of my intuition, and that's when people talk about using your gut.
Mhm.
So many times over the years where my first instinct and that first bodily feeling will be the true one. You can often talk yourself around or talk yourself out of something or let other people do that. And really what I've come down to is what is my body saying, and listening to that.
Yeah, I love that. Now, where do you feel it? Because everybody feels it differently. We always say gut or we always say belly, but it's not actually that for most people. Where do you feel it?
Look, I really do. So I have a sacral response. So I do. I feel it in my stomach, and I'll often ask my stomach, is it a yes? Is it a no? Um, really strong feelings. I can go very cold.
Okay.
That yeah. If I'm doing something where I'm really trying to talk myself into something that I think my intuition knows is wrong, I will feel quite cold.
Mhm.
But I try not to get that far now. I really try to move through decisions and try and respect that initial, what's the right way to go here. I think your body knows, even if your mind doesn't.
Yeah, no, 100%, right? So tell us about a time where you did go with your intuition. You were like, I'm so glad I did that.
Oh, look, there's actually so many times, I think being a business leader, and building a business from the ground up, you're constant in a state of decision making. You can get decision fatigue from it because, at the end of the day, every decision really comes down to you. And even once you've got a team in place, and you're delegating, you still have to do that check-in. Um, I'm trying to think of a specific example that I haven't. I've done it where I've been very relieved about it. I mean, as I say, there's been so many hiring people, making decisions on when to launch, the physical location of the building that we're in now. All of those have been decisions which initially and outwardly might not have seemed like great decisions to take. And I've trusted my intuition to do those. And then they've paid off. And yeah, there's definitely been those, you can see other people looking externally and going, wow, how did you know to do that? Or weren't you lucky that that
Mhm.
happened? Then I
Right.
kind of go, yeah, I was super lucky there. Yeah, that was great. Where it hasn't, it's been working with yourself, and my intuition over the last several years is learning to trust that decision process.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? I mean, I asked the question purposely for the positive, and it's really hard to recall. Can you recall a situation where you didn't follow your intuition and you were like, curses?
Yeah, it's like my the yes, my career of building this business is littered with examples. Normally with people,
Mhm.
normally it's been hiring people or not, often, especially over the last couple of years, and certainly since COVID, where we live has had a real short skill shortage. Trying to get people to work, trying to get the right people to work has been very difficult. And often, out of desperation, I've gone, yeah, they'll do. And I've really known that it hasn't been the right fit and they haven't been the right person. And every single time it hasn't worked out. Um, yeah, so that's certainly a key example. Outside of that, no, it's really, really people, I think, has been the biggest one where I've talked myself around and really regretted it.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, but it is so interesting that, you have probably 1,000 examples even over the last 12 months that you followed your intuition and it's worked out really well. And then there's that 1 or 2 where you're like, "Oh, I did it for, reasons, but I rationalized or I had to validate something." And then, yep, of course, you look back and you say, "Nope, it didn't work out. My intuition knew, but I didn't follow it." But I would say for you, because I know you really well and I know how you make decisions, you probably have like 1,000 to 1 on that. I bet that that's probably the percentage.
I'd agree with that, and that's also a learning as well of I think there's two parts to trusting your intuition is one, the knowing and recognizing like this is the wrong decision. And then look from a pragmatic perspective, you've got to weigh up whether you can go with that. I mean, one actual example, Kim, is last year when we had a change of team and I made an offer for a new head chef role. And immediately they came back with, okay, well, this is what I want. And my stomach knew as soon as I read that email, I knew that it wasn't going to work out. But from a practical perspective, I have a business to run. We have, a number of customers to service, and I didn't have another option on the table. So even though my stomach knew, and I knew, look, this is not going to work out. My brain kicked into gear, and we were like, no, it's okay. Look, I think if we can do this and we can do that, and this could come round. And obviously, it didn't. It
Ye
didn't. It didn't end well, and yeah, but I also, from that perspective, I didn't have a lot of options there. But even so, I suppose the benefit of trusting that intuition is even though I knew on one level it wasn't going to work out, and I was trying to talk myself into it, and I didn't have a lot of options, it meant that when it did run its course and when it started to wind up, I was aware that it was going to happen.
Mhm. Right, so you could be more prepared, right? You probably pivoted faster than you would have if you were just struck blind by that and taken, it would have probably felt like you're kinda taken out at the knees, like, "Oh, no, this is crazy." But I think I remember, hearing you say, "We knew this was going to happen. Yes, I know I can do, this next." And, with your magic and your intuition, what else happens from a manifestation perspective for you, Claudia?
Absolutely. Look, I like to joke that I'm the manifesting queen. I absolutely believe that there's nothing that I can't create or manifest, and it's borne out so many times. Building Dinner is Served, and building the building that we're in and the space we're in, and putting the team together we're in. Laughingly so now. It's at the point where it's more of a, and of course. For the building that we're in, which is in the perfect location for us, it's a location that I really wanted. And when I went to speak to the developers, they'd already sold the spot that I wanted for particular reasons, the geographical location and where that region's going to be down the line. And then I had a conversation with a neighbor of mine that was, oh, I have a friend and he's looking for a business just like yours to go into, his new space. Would you have a look at it? And I looked at the plans and it was it was the spot that I wanted. And again, that was just that beautiful manifestation and synchronicity of it being, just coming together beautifully. And even with that example we just spoke about with the chef that wasn't ideal, wasn't going to work out. And I trusted that the right person would show up. And you and I did some rituals around that, and we did some magic around that, and some visualizations of, okay, well, if this person isn't ideal, then what would that person look like? And literally the day after the previous person that didn't work out had left the business, another person walked in and put their hands on the front counter and said, "I hear you're hiring," and they were perfect. They had the skill set we needed, the aptitude and the attitude, and they started really the next week. And even now, people have said to me, "We thought that was a setup. We thought you had that all sort of planned in the background, and then just once one person sort of was ushered out, this other person came in." I was like, "Oh no, no, that was just." And you start to go down the path of, geez, what if that hadn't happened? Wow, I was
Right.
massively exposed there. But I try not to dwell too much on that, and I try to stay in that alignment with, the right thing will happen at the right time, and that
Mhm.
takes a huge amount of faith.
Right.
In my opinion, that really is the key to manifesting. It's not easy to get there, and it's a lot easier when you've got a proven track record of things working out for you. So I think if anyone is starting out manifesting or has, it's hard to trust when you've got no visible, tangible proof in the world. It is a lot easier for someone like myself who practices this, that works with a business coach like yourself, that we go through these things. It's easier to have faith when you've got, a lot of proof behind you. And I
Mhm.
have, another example of that was, we run a fully electric kitchen. We're a very sustainable business. Most commercial kitchens use fossil fuels, they use gas. But I wanted to design the kitchen and the business around sustainability. So we have a fully commercial electric kitchen. The downside of that is it chews through a lot of power. So one of the ways that I wanted also to be sustainable, but also to lower our overheads, was to put a bank of solar panels in, which was great. But the investment up front was $30,000, which I just didn't have. Cash flow was a big challenge for me. And so I went through this practice of each day in my journal, and each time we were setting intentions around the moon. Solar panels, I'd like that. This is what I would like. And I removed that. Well, how's that going to happen? Because again, if you get your brain involved, it's so difficult. And I was just like, I wonder how that's going to show up. I wonder how that's going to show up. And then, not too far past that, I received a phone call from my landlord. He called and said, I hear you looking at solar panels. Why haven't you put them on?" And I explained I didn't have that cash flow upfront to do it. And he was like, "Well, look, I'll do that for you, and we can just add it to your rent, and obviously you can pay me back," which we're doing. I was like, "Oh, awesome. Great." I knew that was gonna work out. I didn't know how it was gonna happen. I didn't imagine it happening that way, which is why I think if you can take the how out of it,
Mhm.
just but as I say, it's a lot easier when you've got a history and a proven track record of these things working out for you, to get into that groove, that alignment with manifesting.
Right, right. And what, I tell people is start smaller. Like you're talking about a business location, you're talking about massive investment, you're talking about a key position, but you had to get to that point, right? So I'm sure you started smaller at some point.
I did, and I was very new to intuition. Look, I didn't know what a chakra system was. I'd never meditated before I was 40. I'm 48 now, or 47, I can't remember. Um, and I was really new to it. I didn't know how to do it, and I started baby steps. I was like, and it was driven by the business. So it's driven by frustration of not being able to get things to work. I actually listened to a podcast as I was driving about which was a female business owner, and so she interviewed different people, and I happened to hear an interview with a spiritual business owner who was talking about using meditation, and I was really you know what? I've tried everything else. I'm going to try this. And then I listened to like really bite-sized stuff. I consumed a lot of free podcasts
Mhm.
in that space, where they really were very back to basics. Right. We're going to create a jar. which you're going to write your annual target on, and then and every day you're going to put it somewhere that you can see it. You're going to manifest a cup of coffee, you're going to manifest $1, you're going to and it's and people, I think, when you then, as I said, further along that path, can turn their nose up at that. They can, they can think that they are sometimes silly or irrelevant. But as you know, Kim, if I get really stuck, I go really back to basics.
Oh,
I go
absolutely.
back to the putting the post-it notes on the mirror. I go back to write daily affirmations. I go back to simple because they do work.
They do. Yeah.
It's when you get used to using it, you forget you're doing it.
100%. And sometimes there's something that either, we're in the new era now, right? So all the energy has changed, or we're in like we were in Q1 where it was like Stuckville, right? Stuck in Smotherville, right? So sometimes the cosmic energies aren't there. And that's where going back to those brass tacks, those really, they seem simple because I'm going to do the air quotes now, moved beyond it. But have we ever really moved beyond a tool that really works? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I said you can forget to use them, and as you say, so January this year was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly difficult for the world because of the energies we were in and all of that. But for myself personally and for the business, I was we talk about those dark nights of the soul, and I really was in a place of going, why have I done this? What is the point? It was a very heavy energy from a practical perspective. I was in a lot of difficulty with my business, certainly around cash flow and money. I was very much questioning why I was still doing it. What was the point? And it was a really difficult time in in a couple of years that have not been the easiest anyway. And with your help and and being part of RPL as well, and sort of leaning on that community of other businesses, we did go back to basics.
Mhm.
We really did go back to it. Yeah, I still do a lot of daily affirmations. Every time I'm driving, I have a set of affirmations that I say. We have a morning incantation that we do.
Yeah.
And I rely on that very heavily. It's very rare that I'll miss that. I am also a wise strategist, so I do tend to follow the rules.
Yeah.
But I do, and it's so funny. So that jar that I created, we still have it.
I
So
love that.
yeah, it's a jar, and so at the time, and so this would have been about 6 years ago, I picked the biggest number I could think of for what I'd like to do in a year, and it was $100,000. And
Mhm.
so we still have this jar. We keep it in, our dressing room with a post-it note. We keep some change and things in there, and I keep it because it's a really valuable reminder. Because that $100,000 was the biggest number I could see to do in a year, and we now do over that in a month.
I know,
And
which is
that's
amazing.
yeah, and that would have been it was beyond my comprehension. And I think that's the other thing too, is you start small, but it's really beneficial to keep. I have all my old journals,
Mhm.
and it's helpful to go back and have a look and see, and to because then I think if you go back, you see that proof in the world.
Right.
It's for me to recall the solar panels, for example, or the location I wanted, because they were big things. They were big things, and it was big magic, and they were real wow. But there's, the last couple of years in particular, there's 1,000 smaller things that I
Mhm.
wanted, that I asked for, that I set intentions for, that have come to be and come to materialize in the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so amazing. I love that. So you mentioned you were a wise strategist, right? And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today because that's your energetic signature. And you know where I'm going to go with this, Claudia. You've listened to enough podcasts. If you haven't taken that, well, I can just hit record here. Bing. Like if you haven't taken the 12-question quiz, go ahead to your Star Map to Success and you'll find out your energetic signature. Because Claudia, I loved how you said, I feel it in my body. There's a response that I have, right? And so these signatures sometimes we'll respect that. Like why strategists feel it, they can feel it throughout their body. I'm an intuitive visionary. It's normally a thought, like I feel it in my jawline. It's normally the upper chakras, but that's just a response to how your intuition's talking to you. But it's also how you come and you make choice and you make decisions. And for you, wise strategists, I adore my wise strategist. I have to tell you, I love you guys so much. You guys do all the things, all of them. Hmm. All the
We do. We do, and which is funny because I wasn't the best student, but I feel like, I finally, it's like being the straight A student, right? Like I do, I like to, I get the monthly forecast, I use it as a tool. I listen to the weekly podcast, the monthly podcast, I really use it as a framework and a tool. One, because, obviously I'm a, big fan of your work. We've worked together for, a number of years now, but, not only that, but it is a practical tool that I use, and I find it really beneficial. So as a wise strategist, it's helpful for me to understand where the energies are. You do a weekly tip in your weekly forecast, and I like to listen to that. I like to find out. It helps guide me through the week and sort of keep me on track.
Hmm. Yeah. So you're one of the few people, not few, but you're one of the few people that I know about that use it in your business. You use the signatures in your business. Do you feel that that's helpful?
Yeah, I really do. And one for myself, knowing that I'm a wise strategist, knowing what that means in terms of my behavior as a business leader, knowing how that will influence with the energies. But I also ask my leadership team to do the quiz as well. It is incredibly helpful for me to understand how someone leads, how they want to be managed, how they respond in that way, with the signature. And it is. And to be honest, I make everyone in my world do it. Like my husband's done it, my best friend, my personal trainer. I make everyone do it because it's really interesting. As Kim said, if you haven't do it, go and do it because it is useful. It's
Yeah.
useful to understand yourself, but it's useful as a business leader to understand your team,
Mhm.
understand that motivation, and understand how and the strengths that they have, and then also the areas. My personal trainer, for example, she's phenomenal. She's incredible. She's a ruling warrior, so that won't
Mm.
surprise you.
Right.
And we adore one another. We're talking about doing some work together and collaborating on some gym meals and things, which would be great. I know I'm going to have to do all of the legwork,
Exactly.
you know, but she's going to be the best salesperson and best driver
Mhm.
of that. And so that's okay. But if I didn't know that, I would go into that collaboration, perhaps potentially being frustrated. Well, why aren't you doing the background stuff? Why aren't you doing that legwork?
Right.
But instead, I go into it going, wow, we have, a wise strategist and a ruling warrior together can be phenomenally successful, and understanding that. And the same with my leadership team and, those around me. It's helpful for me to understand how they want to receive information,
Mhm.
um, how they're going to work. And I said, I don't happen to have, well, not that I know about, I haven't made everyone on my team do the quiz, just those, in the leadership team. Um, but, so I don't know if I've got other ruling warriors. I have my suspicions.
Yeah. You can kinda tell when you know the signatures as well as you do, you can kinda just be like, "Oh, you're definitely a collaborative explorer. Hello, ruling warrior. Hello, creative superstar." You can kinda tell.
Exactly right. But it's then interesting to understand, right? This is how they're going to want to work. You don't expect them to you wouldn't ask a ruling warrior to turn up and have done all this homework.
Right.
They're just not going to do it.
Right.
Um, so I personally, I find that incredibly helpful. I suppose it's a little bit like doing the personality test that we used to do in
Mhm.
corporate, and understanding people's management style and leadership style and working style. It's no different. It's just a really effective tool.
Yeah. Well, amazing. So we talked about doing a little star peek today, right? Like we talked about, I asked you, can I dive into your stars? And now, how many times have I dove into your stars? Hundreds, right? Because we've been working together for years. And so it's always amazes me though, because I say this, but then of course the universe presents it again like, wow, what else is there? What else is there? Sometimes I'll ask, like, what else is there? Right. So I asked that for you because I said, oh, Claudia, we're going to do the podcast today. I want it to be a different look because I don't want you to sit here and just have to, hear me rattle on about something that you're like, oh, we've talked about this 20 times, right? That's not fair to you. So I'm doing something that is not as known because it's an asteroid, but there's a collection of Jupiter's women, I call them, right? Like they're his moons. And so Vesta is one of them, and Vesta is the keeper of the sacred flame. Now, in goddess, mythology, or in even astrological rooms, she'd be known as house and home and hearth. She's the keeper, the gatherer, but she's really about the sacred flame. If you look at her icon, it's like this beautiful V and this little S sits inside of it. So it looks like a flame coming out of this beautiful cauldron. And so when I've gone into the energy, I'm like, oh, this feels like, how do you hold yourself? Like, what is sanctuary for you? And you have it right at the tippity tippity top of your chart. I'm going to show Claudia the chart because I can, but for the rest of you, you're going to be on audio, right? So there's this symbol right there at the top of the midheaven, which is in Cancer. So what does that mean? That means that for Claudia, it's at her most shining, like, time at noon, that she's out in the world. This is how she's seen. And it happens to be in the sign of Cancer for you. And it's at the 13 degrees. So there's a 4 there. There's this structure. There's this security, sanctuary, sacredness. You're in the food industry. You nourish people. Yeah, I'm going to say you're a goddess among your business leaders. You've won awards. You've been on stage, like, I can see you teaching other people and being an advisor and a guide. And so that is great. Great. I could put air quotes around it. That's great. That's external. But for you personally, it feeds your soul to do so. So how does that feel when I say that?
Well, that feels amazing. I so does Vesta stay at is that a fixed point that she's in?
That's the minute you were born, that's one of your, stars. Yep.
Interesting. I love that. She sounds amazing.
Yeah, she is amazing. She's amazing. She is. And so I was asking the stars, because this is what happens when I say, "Oh, I'm going to do a star peek." We're going to look at one little piece, but it's not little because it's cosmic. But we're going to look at one slice or one lens. And then I asked, why did you come to me today? Like, how is this going to serve Claudia? And Vesta in the sky, where she happens to be, is trine your Vesta, which means she's wildly supportive. She's amazingly open for you right now. And that would be in Scorpio in your second house. So there's the life mission. There's the money. There's the abundance. There's the cyclic energy of I'm going to say, wealth. And, our minds go, money, great. And then we look at, and we know, wealth. There's the prosperity, there's the flow, there's the openness, there's the sacredness of how you serve yourself and nourish yourself. Because when you're doing it for you, you're actually affecting it for others, not only in your cafe, but then you think about those meals going out and other people eating them. And I know you get lots of comments about how many people love your food, love how it's prepared, love all the ingredients. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to add something on that?
No, I was just going to say, it's really interesting that that's happening at the moment, because one of the things that I've been really working on is, you know, so I have a food business, but I didn't come from a food background, as you know, Kim. And so this has been a point of me owning that expertise has been a challenge for me. And that visibility, this was very much, if you want to talk about a calling or a life mission, this wasn't something that I trained at culinary school or went to chefing school and was like, well, that now I'll start my business. This was an idea that came to me that I just couldn't put away. I had no background. My background was corporate sales. And then I had this idea, and this idea just would not leave me alone. It just kept chasing me around until I was like, fine, I'll do this. And I set out. And over the last 8 years, it has been a trial by fire. It has not been easy. And yet it's very much felt like I haven't had an option. This is just what I'm meant to do. But recently, actually, for the last year, I've been saying to myself, one of the affirmations daily is, I choose myself, because
Yes.
we have created this beautiful business, and it is of service, and it is out in the world. And there's a lot of people that, not only enjoy, but rely on our food and our meals. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm very proud of that. But the business hasn't always served me in terms of that financial remuneration. It's been, a real labor of love. It's been a costly endeavor, if you like. And for the last year, I've been trying to look at, okay, well, I choose myself. How does this go both ways? And I know that the business energy is like, it loves me the way that I love it. So, but how do we have that reciprocity with that financial return? Because as you know, Kim, it hasn't been there.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes that can just be the growth that a business is going through. We have consistently grown.
Yeah.
A lot of it has been around the lessons that I've obviously come here to learn around, my own self-worth, about money, about how that I interact with that. But recently, and when I say recently, I'm really talking like the last week or two, it's been about standing in the value that we deliver
Mm.
and then, accumulating that wealth. So it's really interesting that you bring up Vesta with those being, that what she symbolizes.
Yeah, and you and I haven't talked. Like
No.
this, right? So I tapped into your energy and you were like, "This is what we're talking about today." I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." I couldn't even remember if we talked about Vesta, but then when I looked at it on your chart, I'm like, "I don't think we've talked about this."
We have never ever
Which is, mind blowing to me. And yeah, and interesting. Normally, when I do this for someone in the container, in the one-on-one container, I will go through and I call it the many faces of Venus because Venus is all about love. And I'll go through Sirius and Vesta and Juno and Athena. And Vesta was literally like putting out her elbows and like, this is a star peak. Basically, like, this is a star peak, woman. You're going to talk about me and me only. You have Claudia in a few weeks, or, whenever we have our one-on-one, you can deal with the rest of it then. And I was like, yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay, so leaning into Vesta today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. That's fascinating.
You're welcome. And again, right now she's in Scorpio, so she's like dripping with power and with wealth. And I'm literally like, my hands are around my mouth, like she wants you to salivate and know and like almost wash yourself in how much value you are giving, and then to receive the same or more.
And I'm here for that. Again, it's been a big lesson. I can
Mhm.
overserve and over
Yep.
deliver. And I think that can be a personality thing. I think it can be a female thing. I think, as I said, I'm nearly 50. I think, there's still a lot of, my upbringing. I was raised in the UK, and there can still be a very much for girls and women, like, unless you're being helpful or useful, like, how are you? It's not been easy for me to claim that, I deserve this because
Mhm.
because I said so. And I'm really stepping into that. And again, it's a lot of the energies at the moment. I really felt that shift recently, which I think were the Aries and Taurus. And
Aries, yeah.
whoo, yeah. I've calmed down a bit now, but there was a couple of weeks where no one was safe. And you know, and it's been great. It's been really good for me, especially being British, we can be quite reserved. We have a tendency to not speak our truth. We have a tendency to go, everything is fine when it's
Yeah.
really not. Um, Australia's been good, it's very different. So that's been quite good for me. But, you know, Aries recently has really helped me find my voice. It's really helped me. As I said, thankfully, it's calmed down a little bit now.
Yeah.
We're now sitting around assertive as opposed to aggressive. Um, um, but yeah, I mean, that's another example, I suppose, of how you use the energies to for momentum and for helping you. I really needed that airy shove.
Yeah.
My delivery could have used a little work, but even so, I've been able to speak to my team and to speak to those around me and business partners and really say, look, this is what I need from you. And actually, it's been more, this is what I expect from you.
Oh, good.
Um, yeah, I've been able to speak that where a lot of the times previously I've really struggled to verbalize that. I
Mhm.
just haven't been able to get it to come out of my mouth. So yeah, I'm enjoying that.
Oh, good. No, I no, and I love that too. And this is where Aries going into Taurus, Aries will awaken something, and it's bold, and sometimes it can be brash, but it's necessary because then you can settle into it and start wearing a little bit more, and it becomes more normalized when you get into Taurus. And that's exactly the season we're in right now as we're talking. When this podcast comes out, it's going to be Gemini season, which everything's going to be like communication. But we can find our footing in Taurus. And so that's a loving thing. And you can find your footing with that beautiful, wise strategist, grounding that you have, because even though sometimes it's a little bit of a taskmaster, it is very focused and very thorough, I'll just say, right?
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, I think, I listened to the forecast at the beginning of the week, and I think this is a good week for wise strategists. It's about making lists, things like that, and nothing makes a wise strategist happier than making a list and ticking them off. So
Exactly, exactly. And so I just have one question before we close, and that's advice for people that are thinking about it's going to be a really good idea. I can envision a cafe, I can envision a catering business, I can envision a restaurant, or we could even say I can envision a service-based or retail-based business. What advice do you have for somebody that's just starting out?
I think there's two parts to that. And look, as much as I've spoken about trusting your intuition and leaning into that magic and trust, I feel that, when I built the kitchen and the space we're in, I relied too heavily on magic. I took some really big swings and some really, really big leaps. And with hindsight, I didn't do my due diligence with the numbers.
Mhm.
There were also some situations we had, like the rest of the world, we had border closures, we had massive delays getting equipment and inventory. We had a weather event in the region I live that
Right.
significantly impacted. So we went through a lot, and so there were reasons that left us in the financial situation that we're in. But I didn't know my numbers well enough, and I
Right.
didn't have a backup plan. So I just want to caveat that it is great to be able to trust your intuition, to trust the universe has your back, and to be able to go, you know what, this is going to work out. But as a business owner as well, you have to, it's a balance. The same way that we have a feminine and a masculine, you need that mix of that practical business acumen, checking your numbers, understanding, going back over the details, paired with that intuition and trust. And hey, if that hasn't worked out the way that I thought it would, there'll be a reason for that. There's something else coming. Um, but so it would be that. It would be to make sure that you have a plan. Um, Create the vision in your mind and make it a big vision. Dream. There's nothing you can't achieve. There's nothing, you'll be surprised at the way that things show up for you, if you have that big vision. But go back, make sure you've also got that practical side in place too.
Mhm.
Make sure you understand your numbers. Um, yeah, and work to that, because it can be, yeah, business can be an absolute joy, but can be incredibly difficult too.
Right. Right, exactly. I love that, and it is. It's always about getting that core, whether it's business practicality or masculine skills, or in this case, you're using the example of knowing your numbers, as well as because that's not enough. Because 'cause you'll hinder yourself. You won't grow if you stay steeped in that area, and so opening yourself up to those big dreams, right? You said this is a soul calling. I don't know if you could have helped yourself because it was that big of a soul calling.
Yeah, it really was. And look, if it has worked out.
Mhm.
It has. I mean, it's taken a lot of tenacity. It's taken a lot of support. Working with you over the last couple of years has been invaluable, Kim. You alone know the times we've sat in the dark together as we've gone through, like, how we're going to come through that. But there has always been a faith that it will work out, and that this is a business that is to be of service in the world, and to provide something that's not just nourishment, but community and
Mhm.
a space for people, and to hold that magic. And yeah, and that's helped me get through what has been difficult times. But yeah, you got to, and you've got to dream big. I think so many times we can really get caught up in the fear.
Yeah.
It's easy to be scared. It's easy to go, "Well, what if I fail? What if that doesn't work?" And if I look back from when you and I started working together to what we've built now, and where, the numbers that we do, the awards that we've won, the space that we have, the new opportunities that are on the table. Yeah, us 4 years ago, we couldn't have pictured it, right? It
Right.
would have been too big.
Right. No, exactly. Exactly. So I have adored this conversation with you. I hope that you have loved being on this first, episode of our Intuitive Leaders series. I couldn't have thought of a better person to start with. I was hoping you'd be the first one that came in. And of course, as we put it out to the universe, you were. So I'm so excited for that. Is there anything you want to I know we're here. Most of the listeners are probably in US or Canada or UK, but we do have listeners in Australia. Do you want to talk about like how people can find you and how they can go to the cafe?
Yeah, certainly. So as you said, we're in northern New South Wales. So we're in a town called Ballina, which is just south of Byron Bay. So we only deliver to our region currently because of logistics. We don't have the logistics infrastructure that you guys do in the US. But if you're coming to Byron Bay, you couldn't find us. We're just put us into Dinner is Served. You'll Dinner is Served into Google Maps. It will bring you straight to us. Or you can follow us on Instagram, which is Dinner is Served AU, and you can see all the beautiful food that we create.
Oh, I know, because I have to tell you, anytime I look at one of your posts, I'm like, I want to be there. I am like, yum, 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 so delicious, right? So yeah, the food you put out is just absolutely beautiful. And so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being you and for all that you do in the world. And for everybody else, thank you so much for listening and sharing with friends. And until next time, happy soul tidings. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more ways to use the stars strategically to align with your soul purpose, reclaim your power, and increase your prosperity. Please rate and review your favorite episodes, and remember to check out my website at kimwoods.com for my latest forecasts, articles, and offerings. To find out your intuitive success signature, take my 12-question Do You Know, Like, and Trust Yourself quiz and find out how you're living your stars at yourstarmaptosuccess.com. I've so enjoyed our time together, as it's filled with the power of the stars plus strategy to clear the pathway to your success. Until next time, happy soul tidings.